It was a cold, foggy night in late October when I found myself driving through a remote stretch of road in rural Pennsylvania. The journey was supposed to be uneventful, a simple 3-hour drive to visit a friend. But as the minutes dragged on and the road stretched endlessly ahead, I couldn't shake the unsettling silence that surrounded me. The fog seemed alive, curling around my car like ghostly fingers, and the only light came from my dim headlights cutting through the darkness. The radio signal had faded miles ago, leaving me alone with the low hum of my engine and my thoughts. Then, out of nowhere, I saw her. She was standing on the side of the road, barely visible in the hazy glow of my headlights. She wore a long white dress that clung to her form in the damp night air. Her dark hair hung loose around her shoulders, and she raised one hand in a timid wave, signaling for a ride. I hesitated, my heart pounding. Everything about the scene felt wrong, but leaving her alone in the middle of nowhere felt worse. Against my better judgment, I pulled over. As she approached the car, I noticed how pale her skin was, almost glowing in the dim light. She opened the door and slid into the passenger seat without a word. The scent of damp earth and something faintly floral filled the car. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice soft and distant, as though she were speaking from another time. "Where are you headed?" I asked, trying to sound casual despite the unease knotting in my stomach. She hesitated before answering. "Just down the road, to my house, it's not far." Her words were simple, but there was something off about her tone, like she was unsure of where she was going. I pressed for more details, asking about landmarks or a specific address, but her answers remained vague. The drive continued in near silence. Her presence was unnerving. She sat perfectly still, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The temperature in the car felt colder than it should have been, and no matter how high I turned up the heat, the chill persisted. After about 10 minutes, she pointed toward a narrow dirt road that veered off into the trees. "There," she said. I hesitated again but complied, turning onto the path. It led to an old, dilapidated farmhouse barely visible through the fog. The windows were dark, and the place looked abandoned, with overgrown weeds choking the yard and the faint outline of a collapsed barn in the distance. "This is your house?" I asked, my voice shaky. She nodded, her expression unreadable. "Thank you for bringing me home," she whispered. Before I could respond, she opened the door and stepped out. I watched as she walked toward the house, her figure dissolving into the mist. I expected to see her reach the porch, but she didn't. She simply disappeared. Panic surged through me. I jumped out of the car, calling after her, but there was no answer. The only sound was the faint rustling of leaves in the breeze. I approached the house, flashlight in hand, my heart pounding in my chest. The closer I got, the more it became clear that no one lived there. The door hung loosely on its hinges, and the interior was coated in dust and cobwebs. Furniture was overturned, and the air was heavy with the scent of decay. On the fireplace mantel, I noticed a framed photograph. My breath caught in my throat. The woman in the picture was the same one I had just given a ride to. Her pale face, dark hair, and white dress were unmistakable. But the photo was old. The edges were yellowed, and the style of her dress looked decades out of date. I fled the house, my mind racing. When I returned to my car, I didn't look back. The next day, desperate for answers, I stopped at a local diner and asked the waitress if she knew anything about the farmhouse or the woman I had seen. Her face paled as I described the encounter. "You're not the first to see her," she said in a hushed voice. "That house burned down over 30 years ago. The woman you're describing, she died in the fire." I left the diner in a daze, vowing never to return to that road. Even now, I can still see her pale face and hear her soft, haunting voice. The memory of that night lingers like a shadow, a chilling reminder that some souls never truly rest. As the chilling echoes of this story linger, what do you think truly happened that night? Have you ever faced something unexplainable? Share your thoughts or your own experiences in the comments below. Your story might just be our next mystery. Stay curious, stay vigilant, and we'll see you in the next tale of the unknown.